Now we're going to square block some fullness into the bodice. So we're still using our fitted bodice block here with the darts in the front and the back. But what we're going to do is add in fullness and sort of use these darts as part of the fullness. And we'll come up with this little one here. So this is really, I suppose, because this has a waist seam, you'd call this a shirt waister. So there'd generally be a skirt attached to that. I've just put a little band on here as a way of controlling the gathers. The other thing too with this, if you're adding in a lot of fullness, it's good to have, like the fullness, but then it's good to have it, what am I trying to say, secured in place. So you've got these bits that fit onto the body, and then you've got the fullness, and then you've got more fit again. So it's really usual for something like this, a dress like this or a blouse like this, to have a yoke, because the yoke provides the fit and the structure on the shoulders, and then it goes out into the fullness. And this here too, like you could actually have it without the band on the bottom, so it was just full. But I think at that short length probably wouldn't be very flattering. But you could do, you could do a full length dress that just had the gathers at the top and then came out in fullness at the bottom, and then you could wear a belt around it to give it some shape on the body. Okay, to start off with then, we need to think about our yoke, and this yoke here, so the original shoulder seam would have been here. So I've decided that I'm going to come 6 centimeters forward at 6 centimeters on the full scale, parallel to the shoulder line. Bring that forward. So that's 6 centimeters full scale, and this is half of that for half scale, obviously. So 3 centimeters we're coming forward here. And then on our back bodice, all I've done is I've drawn a line at right angles. So the front one is parallel to the shoulder, and the back one is at right angles to the centre back. So right angle there, centre back, and then I've taken it through the end of the dart and just straight across into the armhole there. And you'll see when we create our yoke pattern that will also pivot this dart out as well. So you can see here that we've still got like a nice fit over the shoulder, but there's no dart. We've actually moved the dart down into this seam here, which is easy to do because we've got the line running through the base of that dart. So we'll just do a little yoke pattern to begin with. So we're just tracing off, and remember these blocks don't have seam allowances, so keep that in mind. So I'm lining this up with the back here, so lining the first section up until we get to the dart, and I can actually trace that section off. And then from the bottom of the dart here, we're just going to, actually we need to mark a little point there. We're going to pivot that dart out and then continue the rest of the line here. Okay, so, and then even though this is a straight line at right angles to the centre back here, because we've taken that dart out, that line now goes up slightly towards the armhole, because that's where the dart has been transferred to. So this is our, if I turn it around this way so you can see, so our centre back here, so the centre back will be on the fold. This is our shoulder here. You can write shoulder on there if you want that as a reference, and our front yoke here. So that's our yoke pattern, and the grain line on that would follow the centre back. And now we've done the yoke, so we can go on to the other pieces here. So we'll start with the front. And what we're doing here, I've decided that I wanted this length here to be, when it's expanded, when the gathers, so these front gathers that go in, it's an extra 50% fullness. So this length here on the yoke, what gathers into it will be 50% wider, and then that's gathered in. Okay, so then we just need to measure here. That's 7 centimeters, that length. So we want to add in an extra 3.5 centimeters. And remember, again, this is on the half scale. So what we'll do is start at this side of the paper here. And actually we can put our paper on the, our pattern on the edge of the paper, because it's a nice sharp line. So we just need to go up. So we've traced up to that yoke point, and then at the bottom we'll just put a little mark there. And what we want to do is add in, through this section here, we want to add in 3.5 centimeters extra fabric. So what we're going to do down the bottom here is we're going to draw a line across at right angles to that center front fold, put a little mark there, and we're going to put a little mark at the top as well. So this one here, don't worry about it going onto the neckline. It's just because we're going to square block this in. So we just need, these two marks so that we can keep that square blocking parallel. And what we do here, because we're turning this into gathers, we actually don't need the dart at all. So I'm just going to ignore the dart and then start again over here. I squared this across, and we've got our dart here as well, and we don't want a dart because we don't want to have the gathers at the waist, the gathers at the yoke, and then a dart on the side. So we're going to pivot this dart down into the waist here, and so it'll make some extra gathers. So all we need to do is put a mark on the bottom there. Okay, so we've added our width in through the center front there. Now this was our original point here for our yoke, and so now that we've moved it across, we can continue that bottom section here. So we don't have to do this top bit because that's included in the yoke pattern. Just from that yoke point or the yoke seam down, mark in your front armhole notch, and then down here and to the dart. Now we don't want a dart in our side seam because it's all about the fullness now. It's about gathers, it's not about darting. So what we can do here to get rid of this dart is we can pivot the dart down into the waistline here. So we've marked the top of the dart here, and we're going to pivot from the bust point, and you'll see I swing this around until it closes out the dart, so until the two dart points meet, the two dart arms meet, and then we go down here and then across, and so there's that point. Now we don't this dart here, we don't want to sew in that dart, but we still want the fullness. So what we're going to do is literally just connect these two here. So you can have that coming across, and so we connect the two, and you can see that's got that slight curve there as well. And for the top section here, we just have to draw between these two. Okay, so this is the pattern that I've created for this now. So this bottom section here is turned into gathers, and I've gathered that all the way across. So I usually put just a wiggly line to show gathers. I don't know whether that's actually the industry thing to do, but that's what I do. And write gather on there as well, or gather to waist or something to indicate that. And then at the top here, actually, when I did this, I actually came in. So my idea was that I was going to start my gathers here and start the gathers here. But when I did the little sample, especially in half scale, it was actually a bit fiddly. So I did take the gathers all the way to the edge there. So it's literally just on here, sort of drawing this line all the way across and writing gather on there. And then we needed to add seam allowances, so 1 centimetre seam allowances to the waist, to the side seam, the armhole and the yoke seam, and then it'd be 6 millimetres around the front neck. And on this one as well, this is also we have to mark that the centre front is on the fold, so centre front.
And of course, in your design, you'd have to have some sort of an opening, wouldn't you? So
yeah,
on the back, there would have to be a split opening to be able to get it over the head. Of course, on these little half-scale mannequins, it just slips over.
Exactly.
Very easily.
So I haven't put an opening in this neck. But what would generally happen here is that you would have some sort of shirt opening down the centre front here. So whether that opening went from the neck all the way to the waist, or potentially you could have a like a polo shirt opening, so it only unbuttoned down to here. But keep in mind though that you also have to open up the waist. So on this one here, I've actually got an opening on the side there. So if I've had a skirt attached to there, and then you had potentially had a zip going from here, or maybe even up a bit higher, and then down into the down towards the hip, then you could unzip that and open this up, because the thing is, this as a fitted waist has to actually fit over your shoulders, and you can wiggle into it, but really, for comfort, the more of a zip you would have here, the easier it would be to get into. The other option would be, if you like this closed at the front, that you could have a centre back seam down here and actually sew a zip into the centre back seam as well. So it's just how you want to design it. But as a shirt or a shirt waister style, there would generally be a button opening to get into. Okay, so for the back here, actually, where are we? Oh no, we're just going to take this across. So for the back, we've got our yoke pattern here. Which way does that go? Oh yeah, it goes this way. So we don't have to worry about doing the top section. We just have to add our fullness in through the bottom area here. So just matching that centre back line up with the edge of the paper. And of course, that might happen. It'll depend on, what size you're working on, how big your piece of paper is, and whether you have a nice clean edge. So the line is across here, so I'm just extending that line a bit further, so we've got a reference point there. And we really just need, at the bottom here, to mark that first section. So again, we're going to add in an extra 50% of gather. And remember, with the amount of gather that you're adding in, that if you have, this is just a cotton shirting fabric, and the extra 50% extra fabric actually works really well at this scale. So you might find that if you're working with a lighter fabric, full scale, that you might need to add in twice the amount of fullness. If you're working with a chiffon or something really fine that gathers up, it'll literally gather up to nothing. You might even do twice, or 2.5 times, maybe even 3 times the amount of fullness. So it'll depend, and talk to a technician about that as to the amount that you need to add in. Of course, in some fabrics, it gets to the point where, just because you add in more fabric doesn't make it any nicer, it just makes it bulky. So, don't add in 4 times the amount, unless you're working with a really fine fabric like a chiffon or something that will actually gather up and produce a nice looking amount of fullness. So this is 9 centimeters. So if we add in an extra 4.5 amount of fullness, so we just take our pattern away, draw the line here, and we're going to mark off. Should I do it this way so you can see? So we'll come across 4.5, put a little mark, come across 4.5 at the top, put a little mark at the top. Okay, so, and then we need to line our block back up. So this is the straight line, so I'd line it up with the top and then just make sure that it's parallel with that mark along there. And then we can go over to the other side here, to the armhole. Make sure you mark in your armhole notches, your side seam, and then come in a little bit here. And you'll see this is already, so this has created our line along the top, and we just need to have our line along the bottom here. So it should be, that should be able to just rule that line all the way across. And then, you know, now we've got our gathers incorporated into the waist and to the yoke seam there. And again, you know, like put your little wiggly line to indicate gathers. And have your center back on the fold as well. Or have add a seam allowance. Actually, that's something I forgot to mention. If you did want to have an open a zip down the back there, well, actually, you could probably use, with all this amount of fullness, if you did want to zip down the back and you've done this and forgotten to add on a seam allowance, you could actually say that, you know, like just draw in, cross this out, and just draw in a 1 centimetre seam allowance, and it would just use up a little bit of the fullness. And then adding seam allowances, so 1 centimetre seam allowance at the waist, the side seam, the armhole, and along the top edge here, because that adds on, that goes onto the yoke. So this amount here would gather onto this amount, to this line here. And with your yoke pattern, I didn't mention before, so yep, seam allowance down the centre back instead of it being on the fold if you've got a zip down there. 6 millimetre seam allowance for the neck, 1 centimetre for the front yoke line, 1 centimetre for the armhole, and 1 centimetre for the back yoke line as well. And they're the 3 main pattern pieces for the style, this style here.
And Mark, would you put some balance notches on that yoke to help you with gathering evenly? The front and the back,
I think what I'd probably do, I think you'd probably have on this yoke, you'd have a centre back notch. Mm-hmm. So that would match up with the centre back here on the bottom piece. Certainly in half scale it doesn't look like you need any balance notches because the distances are so small, but yeah, I think I'd have at least a notch on your centre back of the yoke and on the centre back here. I think on the front yoke, this here gathering onto here, it's probably going to be fine. Like even in full scale, it's only going to be this wide, so you know it won't be too hard to keep track of. But yes, it is always a good idea to keep an eye on where you might need notches.
Yeah. And then you can just, you know, pin it at the beginning and the end and pull the gathers in to fit evenly.
Exactly, yeah. So that's that style.